Welcome to our latest Wandering Walks Wonder walking tour. Today we're headed to St. Simon's Island. St. Simon's Island, also known simply as St. Simon's or SSI, is a barrier island in Glenn County, Georgia. Famed as the largest among Georgia's Golden Isles alongside Sea Island, Jekyll Island, and privately owned Little St. Simon's Island, St. Simon's Island is renowned for its warm climate, beaches, diverse outdoor activities, shops, restaurants, historical sites, and natural beauty. As we go along our tour here in St. Simon's, the first historic structure that we're taking a look at, and one of the most recognizable on the island, is the St. Simon's Island Lighthouse. Now, originally there was a lighthouse here that was built in 1810 that was about 75 foot tall and an octagonal structure that had a 10-foot oil-burning lamp. But during the American Civil War, U.S. military forces employed a naval blockade of the coast. An invasion by U.S. Army troops in 1862 forced Confederate soldiers to abandon the area. The retreating troops destroyed the lighthouse to prevent its use for navigation by U.S. Navy warships. A new lighthouse, though, was constructed by the U.S. government just to the west of the original location, and that's the lighthouse that we see today. It was completed in 1872 and is 104 feet tall. It's made out of brick and has a third-order biconvex Fresnel lens, one of 79 still operational in the United States. The rotating lens projects about 4 beams of light with a strong flash every 60 seconds. A cast-iron spiral stairway with 129 steps leads to the top of the lighthouse, where people can still go and walk to the very top of it. Just to the side of the lighthouse is the old lighthouse keeper's cottage, which was leased to Glenn County in 1972 and restored by the Coastal Georgia Historical Society and converted into a museum, where it remains a museum today. The first non-native inhabitants of this area were the Spanish, that was started back with a mission that was called San Buenaventura de Gualaquini, which was established here in the southern end of St. Simon's Island sometime between 1597 and 1609, likely near this exact spot that we're walking through right now. The mission was the northernmost in the Macoma Indian area. In the Temuca language, St. Simon's Island was known as Gualacanini, while the Spanish referred to it as Isle de Belenes, or Isle of the Whales. In 1680, the village of Colon, also known as St. Simon's, was located just a little bit north of here. It was attacked by raiders from various groups, including the Native Americans, the Westos, the Muskegee, and the Chilique. These raiders were supported by the English from the province of Carolina. A combined force of Spanish soldiers and Native Americans intervened, forcing the raiders to withdraw. In 1683, St. Augustine was attacked by a private fleet, and by 1684, missions along the Georgia coast faced attacks from Native American allies of the English. Consequently, the mission of San Buenaventura was forced to move south and merge with the mission of San Juan del Puerto on the St. Johns River. Before this relocation could occur, pirates returned in the latter half of 1684. Lorenzo de Santiago, the chief of San Buenaventura, relocated his people along with most of their property and stored maize to the mainland upon learning of the pirates' presence. When the pirates arrived at San Buenaventura, they found only 10 men left to guard the village. These men retreated to the woods, and the pirates burned the village and mission. Just a little bit north of here from where we're walking, a fort was built. That fort was called Fort Frederica, which is now known as Fort Frederica National Monument. It was constructed in 1736 as the military headquarters of the province of Georgia during the early English colonial period. That fort served as a strategic buffer against Spanish incursions from Florida. In the 1730s, St. Simon's Island was occasionally home to John Wesley, the young minister of the Savannah colony. Wesley later returned to England and in 1738 founded the evangelical movement of Methodism within the Anglican Church. During his time on St. Simon's, Wesley performed missionary work but felt despondent about his lack of success in converting the local inhabitants, noting that their environmental hardships were worse than he could describe. His brother Charles Wesley also conducted missionary work on St. Simon's Island during that same period. In the late 18th century, Methodist preachers traveled throughout Georgia as part of the Great Awakening, a religious revival movement led by Methodists and Baptists. This movement had a significant impact, notably converting many enslaved African Americans in Georgia and the other 13 colonies to Christianity. On April the 5th, 1987, 55 members of the St. Simon's United Methodist Church were commissioned to establish a new church at the north end of St. Simon's, where John and Charles Wesley had once preached and ministered to the people at Fort Frederica. The new church was named Wesley United Methodist Church, with Bishop Frank Robertson serving as its first pastor. Due to it being an island here along the Atlantic Ocean, the St. Simon's Island was involved in the American Revolution. In fact, in 1778, Colonel Samuel Elbert commanded Georgia's Continental Army and Navy. On April the 15th, he received intelligence that 4 British vessels were navigating St. Simon's Sound. Elbert mobilized approximately 360 troops from the Georgia Continental Battalions at Fort Howe and marched them to Darien, Georgia, where they boarded 3 Georgia Navy galleys. The Washington, commanded by Captain John Hardy, the Lee, commanded by Captain John Cutler Braddock, and Bullock, that was commanded by Captain Archibald Hatcher. On April 18th of 1778, these galleys entered the Frederica River and anchored about 1.5 miles from Fort Frederica. The following day, they engaged the British vessels in combat. The colonial ships were equipped with heavier cannon than the British ships, and their galleys, having a shallower draft, could be rowed much more effectively. As the wind died down, the British ships struggled to maneuver in the restricted waters of the river and sound. Consequently, 2 British ships ran aground, forcing the crews to escape to other vessels. This battle demonstrated the effectiveness of the galleys in confined waters as opposed to ships designed for open seas. The victory in the Frederica naval action significantly boosted the morale of the colonial forces in Georgia. After the American Revolution, this area became known for its cotton production. During the Plantation era, which is considered sometime after about 1800 or so, St. Simon's Island became a hub for cotton production, particularly known for its long fiber Sea Island cotton. The island was largely deforested to establish several large cotton plantations, which were worked by enslaved Geechee people and their descendants. Plantation owners often resided on the mainland in towns like Darien, especially during the summer months when the island was considered swampy and prone to diseases prevalent in the lowlands. Enslaved Geechee people lived on the island and were not permitted to visit the mainland without an enslaver. The enslaved individuals on the island were often kept in smaller groups and had more interactions with whites, leading to some confusion with the Gula people from South Carolina. One of the original slave cabins, known as the Tabby House, still stands at a roundabout on a road here not too very far from this area that we're walking through. During the early stages of the Civil War, Confederate troops occupied St. Simon's Island to defend its strategic position at the entrance to Brunswick Harbor. However, in 1862, Robert E. Lee ordered an evacuation of the island to redeploy the soldiers for the defense of Savannah, Georgia. Before leaving, they destroyed the lighthouse, as we talked about earlier, to prevent it from being used as a navigation aid by U.S. Navy forces. Most property owners also retreated the island, taking the people they enslaved with them. The U.S. Army then occupied the island for the remainder of the Civil War. After the war, the island's population was in ruins, and landowners found it financially impractical to continue cultivating cotton or rice. Many owners moved inland to pursue other occupations, leaving the island's economy dormant for many years. Meanwhile, formerly enslaved people established a community right in the center of the island, which was known as Harrington. There have been several different types of industry on St. Simon's Island throughout the years. One of those being the lumber industry, which has an important part in American history. The first lumber exports from St. Simon's Island occurred after the Naval Act of 1794, when timber harvested from some 2,000 southern live oak trees at Gascoigne Bluff was used to build the famous USS Constitution ship and 5 other frigates. The USS Constitution, known as Old Ironside, is still the oldest active naval ship in the country. It earned its nickname because cannonballs bounced off that hard live oak planking. The second phase of lumber production on the island began in the late 1870s after the Civil War with the construction of mills around Gascoigne Bluff. This supported a vibrant community that lasted until the early 20th century. During this period, lumber from St. Simon's Island was shipped to New York City, and much of that lumber was used in the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge. Unlike the post-Civil War era, the decline of the lumber industry did not lead to economic hardship. By the 1870s, summer cottages were being constructed on the island's south end, and a small village that we're walking through today began to be formed. The construction of a pier in 1887 brought visitors by boat from Brunswick and South Georgia, and the Hotel St. Simon's opened in 1888 on the present site of a park called Massingale Park that marked the beginning of the island's hospitality industry. 2 more hotels were built near the pier about a decade later. And with the arrival of automobiles and the opening of the Tourist Causeway in 1924, this ensured the continued growth of tourism on St. Simon's Island, an industry that is the strongest in the area even today. St. Simon's played a pretty significant part, it's kind of a small part, in World War II. When on April the 8th, 1942, World War II directly impacted residents of St. Simon's Island when a German U-boat sank 2 oil tankers in the middle of the night. The explosions shattered windows as far away as Brunswick, and rumors spread about German soldiers landing on the beaches. Security measures were tightened, and anti-submarine patrols from Glencoe Navy Air Station in Brunswick eventually ended the U-boat threat. During the World War II, McKinnon Airport, a small airport right here on the island, became a naval air station and was home to the Navy Radar Training School. The King and Prince Hotel that were built in 1941 were used as training facilities as well as part of the radar station. as we head back to take a look at the water, we see and have listened to that the evolution of St. Simon's from a center of cotton production and lumber and milling to a prominent tourist destination that it has become today really shows the enduring appeal of this small island as well as this small community here in Georgia. I hope you've enjoyed this Wandering Walks of Wonder tour here in St. Simon's Island and learning a little bit about the history of the island itself. If you've visited the island before, make sure to leave a comment on some of the things that you like most about the island. Otherwise, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and we will see you on our next Wandering Walks of Wonder walking tour. Take care now. Bye-bye.